Doug, tell me about your book. We can see in the background A Billion People in the Shadow. How did this book come about? How did you think of writing this book? Also, share your personal journey because I know that you've faced disability yourself in life, and that's why today you are an advocate for disability.
Sure.
I also want to understand there are three questions here. I also want to understand what a billion people in the shadows means.
Yeah, sure. So it's fun because as I think about it, maybe in my introduction, I probably didn't even mention that I have a disability much. So, and that's uh, a lot of how I frame this is that people with disabilities, they're just regular people, and I mean, a disability is part of them, but it doesn't necessarily define them. And sure, I do have to do some things differently than others, but I don't. It's not like the first thing that I always lead with about, well, who's Doug McCullough? It's like, well, it's not my disability. It's just part of who I am. I was born with a progressive neuromuscular disease, specifically spinal muscular atrophy. Started seeing doctors when I was 11 years old, as I was always the slowest runner in class, and by that point, it was clear that something wasn't right. And so it's not there's not an issue with my muscles, it's the nerves that go to the muscles that innervate them. And over time, they stop working. So over time, there's just less signals going to your muscles and the muscles atrophy. And so I've gone from being that 11-year-old that had problems keeping up from running to then just having problems like getting up out of chairs, using stairs, walking longer distances, walking on uneven terrain. As I got older, I started having more falls because I just didn't have if I got knocked off my balance just a little bit, I didn't have the muscle strength to compensate for that. So I'd fall over. And, like every week or two, I'd have a fall. And over the last 20 years, I started breaking bones because the falls would get harder because I couldn't catch myself as much. And then 2.5 years ago, I started using a power wheelchair off and on just because it was getting harder for me to walk longer distances or on uneven terrain outside. And then unfortunately, about almost 2 years ago now, I broke my femur and I've been doing a lot of rehab from that. And I'm using the chair full time at the moment, but hoping to get back to walking some. But really the journey starts with when I was that young adolescent and trying to understand how to show up with a disability. And certainly this was the late 70s, early 80s, and the typical societal mindset was that disability is something to be looked down on. And so I had to deal with a lot of shame and stigma of I would do everything I could to hide it, for example, because I didn't want people to think of me as a disabled person or view me through that lens because it had such a negative stereotype. And and just how to deal with it. I would spend a lot, I would think, why can't people just accept me the way that I am? And then eventually I realized, and I read this one story about a person that has serious stuttering problems to talk about his journey a little bit. And really the takeaway from that was that it was his own self-consciousness was the issue. And that really stuck with me is that here I was waiting for everyone else to accept me the way that I was. But what I really need to do was accept it myself first, because how can other people accept my disability if I can't even accept it myself? So that really changed my whole mindset. And then as I got older, I started getting involved in adaptive sports and meeting other people with disabilities. I'd never known another person really with a disability growing up in a rural community there in South Central Pennsylvania. And and as I started meeting other people with disabilities and just getting more connected with the disability community, I started paying more attention to just seeing how people with disabilities would be marginalized. For example, learning that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities was 75%. And like, how can that be? Like, that just doesn't, I never even considered that because I was just always my expectation, like, well, of course I'm going to get a job and work. Why wouldn't I work? I can certainly work. And I was just focused on living my life the best that I could with my disability. And I started learning more about just these issues with the broader disability community and became more tuned to that and started thinking and started seeing various ways that the disability community would be marginalized. For example, seeing elevators out of service. For example, I almost missed a flight out of Newark for work one time because the elevator wasn't working and I had to figure out a way to get to the level I needed to get to. Another example was here at my local mall in Bridgewater, New Jersey. One winter, I saw the snow pushed into the handicap parking spot which was really problematic for me because I needed that handicap parking spot, in a snowy parking lot. And just starts thinking, somebody should make a difference about that. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe I could help with that. And so that's when I really started getting a more visible and doing more to just speaking up about when I see things that could be done better. And often what I've learned also is approaching it in a very positive mindset, in that most people aren't actively discriminating against people with disabilities. They just don't know what they don't know. And they're just accidentally marginalizing people or doing things in a way that isn't particularly empowering. So just sort of pointing that out and helping educate people and make them more aware. It's often said that the disability community is the largest and most misunderstood minority group in the world. So that's really my disability journey. And then the Billion People in the Shadows title comes from the statistic that there's over 1 billion people in the world with disabilities. So depending on the definition, it's usually 15 to 20% of the global population has a disability. So now with 8 billion people in the world, it's more like 1.5 billion people with disabilities. Given 15 to 20%, that's like 1 out of every 6 or 7 people. But when I go out in my daily life, I'm not seeing 1 out of every 6 or 7 people with a disability. When I go to the grocery store, to the movies, or to my job, it seemed like a lot of times I was the only one. So I'm like, where are all these billion people with disabilities? So that's how the title came to. It just came on the spur of the moment. To answer your final question, how the book came about is that Johnson Johnson had an internal TED Talk program that I started around 2012, and I'd seen a couple of people give talks that were sort of treating disability in an old-fashioned way as disability as inspiration. And I'm like, well, that's not really what it's like to live day in and day out with a disability. And we certainly don't want to put people on a pedestal with disabilities just for doing regular things and trying to live their life to the fullest. What we really want to do is just normalize disability, teach people that it's really, not that big of a deal. And people with disabilities have the same hopes and dreams as everyone else. And a lot of people with disabilities are thriving out there. And so I did this talk at Johnson Johnson about disability perspectives and misconceptions that became one of the most popular talks globally at J&J. And I should also mention I did that talk about 7 months after I joined Princeton Toastmasters. So I actually used my first few talks at Toastmasters to help put that TED Talk together and try out a couple different things and get, as we talked about, the valuable feedback from seasoned speakers. So I did that talk, and it became popular, and I kept getting invited to talk to different groups around the J&J. And at the end of every talk, I go, oh, I forgot to say that, or oh, I should have answered that question differently. And so I then thought, well, I should just write this down so then I don't have to worry about leaving something out.
Wow, what a journey. I've read the book. This book doesn't have just one flavor, I can say. It has a whole 360 degrees on disability. You start with the fact that while disability is one word, it's an umbrella term for a lot of kinds of disabilities. And I think you should have also shown empathy as a person towards the rest of the world, saying that it's difficult for a regular person who doesn't have a disability to know about so many different kinds of disabilities. So, what you really wanted to say is that there has to be an understanding from a person who has a disability that there is no awareness. Like you said, in your early years, you were trying to hide it, or you were conscious of the fact that you didn't want to be treated in a certain way. But on the other side, if a person is not aware of the fact that somebody has a disability, or the fact that somebody is conscious about that disability, or the fact that there is some sort of a unknown exclusion because of that, I think that education is very important. And I think one of the things that your book does really well, and it's in the beginning part of it, which I liked, is to create just that awareness that yes, there is a different kinds of disabilities. Don't expect people to know about it, but awareness is a good start. uh, what I liked in your book is also the fact that, in fact, I can quote those
Huh?
words from your book, which really struck me. That we need to stop objectifying people with disabilities and treat it like a normal part of human condition. We shouldn't be pitied, but we shouldn't also be put on a pedestal and called inspirational for doing everyday activities. If someone reads, so I think I was very moved by that because it's so true and we don't realize it. Sometimes we feel we are doing a good job because we are not pitting somebody, but I'm a big believer of treating everybody on merit by giving them
Yeah.
equal opportunity. So don't make a disabled person feel that, oh, because you're able to brush your teeth, wow, that you're
Right.
inspirational. No, give them an equal pedestal and let them achieve and accomplish things that they can. And you're a perfect example of that, how much you have achieved in your own life despite having a disability at a very early age. Um, that's something I really, really liked in the book. But I also think, Doug, it's you as a person. How, from your early years when you were conscious about it, and later, you said, no, I'm going to change this. You have gone ahead and achieved so much in your life. And you're right about it that when anybody meets you, including when I met you for the first time, we were not talking disability. We were talking about what you do. I noticed
Right.
what a great speaker you are. And then, there was your book. So your disability neither defines you, neither does it constrain you. And that is
Right.
one thing I think is very inspirational about you. And I'm hoping that more people that read this book can take that away. I wanted to ask you the one question, and for anybody who buys and reads this book, you have included a lot of pictures of your travels and stuff, and you've done it all. Things that a person like me still has on bucket list. You have done rafting, you have done skydiving, you have done skiing. Tell me, how have you managed? What does it take as a mindset to say, okay, despite this, I'm going to go and try and go ahead those things? Is it just inspiration without yourself within yourself, or there's also a role of an enabling environment that is required for something like this?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for all the kind words, Ritu. Really appreciate it. It's so nice of you to say. The one thing before I get into that specific question, just related that struck a thought in my head as you were talking is there's a common phrase in the disability community called the tyranny of low expectations. And I think that's so important is that when we have low expectations for people, they live into that. They don't expect much of themselves then, and they don't think that they can thrive maybe. And then conversely, when we have high expectations for people, inevitably people rise up to the occasion and live up to that as well. And so that's why I think it's so important. And it gets back to the gift of feedback we were talking about earlier. If we do such a service to provide such a service to people when we give them tough feedback to help them get to the next level as a speaker. I mean, it's not doing it in a mean or nasty way, but doing it in a productive way to help them reach their potential. And so that has applications not just for public speaking, but in all aspects of life, of being your best self and living up to your potential of what you can do. And so I think that's so critical, is just having those high expectations and pushing people gently, kindly, but nonetheless pushing them to see what they can do. And it's miraculous oftentimes what that leads to. Then regarding some of the adventures I've had, as far as, like I said, I like to say, to summarize it, sometimes I'll say, I've rafted the Grand Canyon, I've kayaked the canals of Venice, I've snorkeled on the
Oh,
Great Barrier Reef, and those are a couple certainly highlights of adventures I've had. But I never put that much thought into it other than that sounds like fun. Let me go do that, or let me figure out a way to do that. But I think maybe the one thing that I would put a caveat on sometimes is that sometimes speak, oh, that sounds like fun, but then we all have this, the voice in the back of our head says, oh, well, that's going to be too difficult, or I'm not sure if you can do that, or that might be lead to put me in an embarrassing situation. And so I think one of the lessons that a person with a disability brings is that mindset of sort of pushing through some of that voice in the back of your head sometimes, and pushing through that concern about being embarrassed or of situation or failing in a certain situation, to be like, hey, I'm going to push through that voice and see where that leads. And so I think that's something that a lot of times, there'll be an event or something like, well, I don't know what I'm good. I don't know anyone at that event, and I'm not sure if I want to necessarily go to that, because I'm going to have to, be again maybe the only disabled person, or I'm going to go to an event and maybe the event's not accessible, and then I'm going to have to figure out a way to work around that, and maybe that'll be, and you can come up with a thousand excuses. And then I think it's important to sort of realize when you're doing that and be like, wait a minute, are these really valid excuses, and instead saying, having that positive mindset of, hey, this could be a really fun experience. Let me go do that and not worry about all those, thousand excuses in the back of my head. And inevitably, when I do that, I end up having a great time. And in hindsight, like, I'm so thankful that I went ahead and did this. And I think that's an important mindset in general, is to uh, you know, not let those voices in the back of your head dissuade you. And as one of my favorite sayings is, the only things we regret in life are the things that we don't do. And so sometimes that will I'll think of that as well. Like, wait a minute, uh, we're, I'll definitely regret this if I don't at least try doing it. So let me go do it. And like I said, inevitably that almost always leads to good things. And so that's been sort of the mindset with all that. Whenever I hear something that sounds like fun, like, hey, let me go try that, or go do that, and I'll figure it out. If there's going to be any challenges, I've always been able to overcome that in the past. I'm sure I'll be able to do it again this time.
Wow, that is so inspiring to hear. But tell me, what are some of the misconceptions about disability that the world has at large, and what are you hoping this book can bring about a change in?
Yeah, well, I mean, I literally have a section in the book about common misconceptions. And so the first one is that a disability means a life of hardship and humiliation, and that it's, oh, what a tough life it must be as a person with a disability. And sure, there's tough aspects of it, but as I say, 99.5% of the time, my life is just like anyone else. And everyone has challenges in their life, whether it's, whatever it may be, whether it's, difficult, uh, taking, difficult job, or difficult boss, or difficult, elder care responsibilities, or child care responsibilities, or everyone's always constantly going through challenges in life. Clean, your dog gets sick and throws up in the house or whatnot, or that's just part of it. And so just sort of pushing through that. And so disability really doesn't, sure, there's challenges, but everyone has challenges, and that doesn't mean that in general, as we just talked about, some of the fun adventures I've had, you can certainly thrive as a person with disability. So disability certainly doesn't necessarily mean that you have a bad life at all. Another common misconception is that really has resonated a lot with people. Like, a lot of people have talked to me about this after they read the book, the difference between accessibility and inclusion. That so much of the work around disability has been around accessibility. Certainly, the Americans with Disabilities Act here in the U.S., putting in ramps, elevators, having closed captioning, having sensory safe spaces for people that are neurodiverse to get overstimulated, doing those types of things. And that's all important, but that's really only, a piece of it. And the bigger part is just, how can we be inclusive in general, and the example I give of that really resonates with a lot of people is, as mentioned, I went to Duke Business School, and I'm a big basketball fan. Was so excited to go to my first game, and at that point, I was still able to climb up steps with a railing, and I figured that's what I would do when I got to the game. But when I got there, the space for graduate students was just this big open bleacher with no railing. So I'm like, well, I can't climb up into that. So I grabbed an usher and explained that I had this disability, and he was super accommodating and took me to a seat right on the floor, just a couple rows behind the basket. It was a great seat. And but as I was sitting there in that seat, I kept looking over the bleachers. All my friends are there having fun doing these wacky cheers, and here I was sitting next to a grumpy old man, and I felt like really like an outcast. Like, oh, here I am stuck with this grumpy old man while all my friends and peers are all over there having fun. And so after that, I never sat in the accessible seating anymore. I would just go to the game and look for a couple, big grad students and say, hey, can you give me a hand climbing up in these bleachers? And of course, they were happy to accommodate me. And so then there I was, with all my friends and peers having fun in the stands. And so those bleachers weren't accessible, but by, asking for help and being really part of that crowd, I really felt included. And so it's not just about accessibility, it's about true inclusion. So I really push throughout the book to encourage people to think, not just accept maybe to think a little bit out of the box sometimes of how can we really be inclusive, and how can we include either our family or friends or other or loved ones with disabilities into all aspects of life, whether it's work life, personal life, travel, all these different things in life. That how can we be truly inclusive as opposed to simply, just thinking about providing accessible accommodations sometimes. So I think that's really the big takeaway is being truly inclusive of people with disabilities in all aspects of life.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about in the book is a real shift in the thinking. I think the job is not done by just providing access. How do you accommodate and include people with disabilities is the bigger shift that you are talking about. You worked in corporates also. Do you think some of it, I know corporates are well-meaning when they say diversity. And quoting from your book again, I have loved your book, you can make it out.
Thanks.
You said disability is not bad diversity, but a vibrant type of diversity. So the question I have is, how do you think corporates are they changing this narrative a bit by being having inclusion, or do you think there's still a journey of understanding how to execute this inclusion? Like it's not about access, but it is about real inclusion.
Right.
Just widen your thinking on how you can accommodate a diverse set of people
For
at the
sure.
workplace.
Yeah, it's really been exciting since I got involved in this space back in like 2013, 14. At that point, as you said, companies would have diversity initiatives, and a lot of times diversity initiatives would focus more on gender, race and ethnicity, and the LGBTQ plus community. And there'd be some discussion about disability, and it'd be, well, that's a nice to have. That's the nice thing to do. That's the right thing to do, is to be inclusive of people with disabilities. And it's been really exciting over these last 10 plus years to see that mindset change, to be like, oh, the same business case that applies to other types of diversity absolutely applies to disability as well. And so it's not just the nice thing to do, but it's actually beneficial to our business, that there are learnings that we can get, the different experiences and perspectives that people from the disability community can bring to bear to really make our business stronger. And not to mention, obviously, it's a huge market when you talk about 1.5 billion people around the world with disabilities. Just the sheer monetary market size that encompasses. And of course, it's not just the person with a disability, but it's their support structure as well, their families, their spouses, others as well. So, I mean, simple example, there's certain hotel chains that I frequent more because they have better, disability accessible rooms. And so, and if you don't have someone in your company that understands those disabilities perspectives, you're basically leaving out, 1.5 billion people. I mean, and what a huge market that's to not to be supporting and serving. So yeah, it's been, like I said, really exciting how companies are now viewing it as a competitive advantage. Just like, I mean, it would seem silly now to be like to say, well, we're not going to hire, we don't need any women, in our business. Like, well, of course you need women, in your business. And so that mindset, is again the same point with disability. Like, oh, it's not just about being nice; it's about uh, about the business advantages that this can provide, and just some of the, we touched on a little earlier about just that positive mindset and the ability to overcome challenges and get pushed through the naysayers in the back of your head, is that people with disabilities actually, there's more and more research, and there's different stories out there about how people with disabilities have some unique skills and benefits that actually leads to better results. So a couple real quick examples I just love to share is one, a lot of tech companies, they've been one of the leading sources of hiring people with disabilities, because they've been hiring a lot of people on the autism spectrum, because they find that they're better than, quote, their able-bodied people at certain jobs like debugging code, because these people on the spectrum oftentimes they don't want to socialize with their other employees as much. They just want to get in at their desk and just focus on just this one task, and they just they really dive deep into it, and they, quote, and like I said, they find that they actually outperform their, quote, normal employees. And then the final example I'll share is I came across this book a few years ago about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and the book was really focused on his journey with polio. And the real takeaway from that is that he did not thrive as a leader and become president of the United States in spite of his disability, but because of his disability. The lessons that he learned through his journey with polio and overcoming the challenges with that and facing the self-doubts that he had early in his polio journey are really what gave him the tools and the perspectives and the skills to then become the great leader and president that he was. And so that just really reinforced the benefits. And as I said, as you quoted in the book, it's just a vibrant type of disability. It's not a lot of people view disability as less than, and nothing could be further from the truth. Sure, it has challenges, but also unlocks all these other positive traits that are of real benefit to society.
No, absolutely. That's so well put. Doug, you're also continuing to do work in this area. Could you share for us what are some of the things that you are hoping to achieve with the work you do? What is the kind of work you are doing today within the
Yeah.
disability communities?
Sure. So the book certainly is a, you think when you write, when you're done, when you publish the book, the job is over, but nothing could be further from the truth. As a marketing person, you can appreciate this for too. It's all about then, getting visibility for the book and marketing the book and getting it to people to really maximize the impact of that to make the difference. So I'm spending time, and this is all new to me. I guess I didn't mention my career. I was a supply chain and procurement person. So marketing and sales is really a new space for me, and just learning as I go. And certainly the book publishing industry is a whole nother industry for me as well. So just learning how that industry works. So continuing to work in that space. And then the other big thing out working on that's a passion project of mine is leadership development for people with disabilities, and that really grew out of my work with the disability employee group at Johnson & Johnson. And so often we would do events. For example, well, let's do an event for Disability Pride Month, or let's do an event for World Autism Awareness Day. And I would delegate parts of those events to other employees with disabilities. And oftentimes they would struggle with that, and you'd have to hold their hand and micromanage them through that. And it didn't make sense to me, because I'm like, this person is a super talented person. They're great at their job. They're very smart. How come they're struggling to run a basic, lunch activity? And then it struck me that so often people with disabilities, haven't built that leadership muscle, and don't have the same leadership experiences as their peers. For example, they weren't student council president in high school, or they weren't captain of the basketball team, or they weren't an officer in the professional club in college, because their peers never viewed them as leaders, and thus they never viewed themselves as leaders. And now they start doing well in their careers, and they're asked to lead, and they're like a deer in the headlights. And so I looked at other diversity leadership programs. For example, Johnson Johnson, like a lot of big companies, they had specific leadership programs for women and leadership development programs for people of color or LGBTQ plus, but there really wasn't anything out there for disability. So I think it's a real untapped resource, just as I talked about the example of FDR and the leadership skills that disability provided him. And so I've done some work in this space and had to put together a pilot program. And I'll share one quick story from that. pilot program that really brings this together. And this individual was a super talented mechanical engineer. He worked at a car. He was one of the big vendors for the big automotive industry. Is very talented engineers in his late 20s, but he had this. He was deaf in one ear as a result of some sort of birth defect, and he was so at our first group leadership program. He admitted to the group that he never told anyone at work that he was deaf in this one ear, and he'd actually had longtime friends that he'd never shared this with outside of work. And so this just completely shaped, how he would do things. For example, he'd go to a meeting at work and he'd try to sit in a certain place in the room so he could hear with his good ear. And if he missed something because of his deafness in one ear, he would make up an excuse like, "Oh, I'm so stupid," or "I'm sorry, I just forgot that." But then, we said before our next session, we'd like you to tell one person that you've been hiding this from. He's like, "Oh, I'm just not ready. I just, maybe by the end of this 12-week program I'll be ready, but I'm just not ready to do that yet." Next session rolls around and we said, "By chance, did you tell anyone?" And he says, "I told 5 people. It was amazing. They were all so supportive." And here he'd been carrying this burden with him. So I talked earlier about the shame and stigma I dealt with, growing up initially with disability. And this person, was going through that same thing on his own journey. And you could just see how he blossomed right in front of your very eyes, and how he showed up, at work and in life was completely different. And it's just that one, flip of the switch. So I think that's certainly in how he shows up as a leader is just, he's unleashed now to really become, the powerful leader he's capable of. And so I think that's so important. So often the disability community is getting people, just to flip that switch to realize that it's your own self-consciousness is holding you back, and it's really normalize disability and just get out there and live your life. And so I'm really, trying to flip that switch for more people out there, and for people that maybe don't have disabilities but know someone with a disability to help their loved one, flip that switch for them. So that's the work I'm doing, focused on now.
I love the term flip the switch. I think that is transformative work you're doing for the disability community. And I think nobody else would be in a better position to do the leadership coaching or training that you're doing and the transformation if somebody hasn't gone through those steps, because you have personally gone through that journey. You understand that journey deeply. You can see the signs. And I think coming from somebody like you, it's also credible for another person to say, "Hey, I'm carrying a lot of weight. I think this person has had the same journey. I think I can trust in him what he's giving me as an advice." And it's liberating. The more we carry
100%.
inside us, oh my God, this is so liberating. And I think it's such a wonderful work you're doing. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, Doug, for leadership training or coaching, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media person. The main platform I use is LinkedIn, so I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is pretty simple. It's just my name, Doug McCullough 94 at hotmail.com. So those are also the little group I've started to do this work is called Disability Leadership Ventures. So if you just Google disabilityleadershipventures.com, you'll find my website as well with so you can connect with me through any of those 3 ways.
And where can people buy A Billion People in the Shadows,
Yeah, well,
the
I
book?
was so that's thanks so much for that, Ritu. You can tell you're the marketer and I'm not. But I would also mention just one other important note for the book. The subtitle to A Billion People in the Shadows is The Ultimate 1-Hour Guide to Understanding Disability. So it's a short, easy read. It's not a huge commitment. It's a little more than an hour. It's more like an hour and a half to an hour, 45 minutes read, but it's a short, to the point book, and it's available anywhere books are sold online, and also on Audible. I did an audio book because I got feedback from the people with visual impairments that they preferred audiobooks to using book readers. So it's available on Audible and the ebook is also available on Amazon specifically. So Amazon has the ebook, and obviously Audible. And for those, Audible is a subsidiary of Amazon. So Audible, Amazon ebook, or anywhere books are sold online, you can get the book. And we should mention it made it to number one in its category on Amazon in business diversity and inclusion. So it's an official Amazon bestseller in business diversity and inclusion. So very
Wow.
proud that they did that. So it bounces all around, from like the top 5 to the top 200. So you drive yourself crazy, looking, day by day. Where's it today? Where's it today? And, if it's up high, you feel you get a jolt of positive, and if it's down, you get you get a jolt of negative, like, oh, I need to do some more sales and marketing work to get it back up there. So, but it bounces all over the place. It's hard to figure sometimes.
No, but I think the right book finds its place with people over time. That's what I believe. Apart from any marketing and things that you do initially, and I think this is a book with deep insight. So I'm sure it'll do well. And congratulations for it being the top seller in its category on Amazon. That's no easy feat by any chance.
And
Apart
it all
from
stemmed
before,
from
yeah, yeah,
Toastmasters. And it all stemmed from Toastmasters. When it goes back to that, the
yes.
original talk I did, that I used Toastmasters to put together, and joined Toastmasters to do just this type of work and help me find my voice. So yeah, Toastmasters plays a big role in this work that I've found myself doing.
Wonderful. That's so wonderful to hear. When you're not writing books and doing leadership coaching and attending Toastmasters meeting, what does Doug do in his free time?
Uh, yeah, it's the normal things like spending time with family and friends. I like movies, like music, like reading, I like travel, and doing. I continue to do a lot of adaptive sports, and now that I'm using the power wheelchair full time, I've gotten connected with some great power wheelchair sports. So I just got connected to a power soccer team in North Jersey, a power hockey team in Philadelphia. I'm headed there tomorrow morning to play a game. And then there's another sport called Volt hockey that came out of the Netherlands that actually there's only 2 teams so far in the U.S., but it's looking to grow the sport. And I just got to add to the national board of directors for Volt hockey to try to help grow that sport. It's a specialized chair that goes really fast. It goes 10 miles per hour, and it's sort of a combination of go-karting and hockey. So that's a real fun sport that we'll see how that. But it's the most inclusive sport I think I've ever seen. If you can sit and move your hands to move a joystick, you can play the sport. I've seen people with respirators play the sport. And so it's amazingly inclusive sport, and I think there's a huge opportunity to get people involved in this sport called Volt hockey. So those are some things I'm doing outside of just the base disability leadership and speaking work.
Well, we'll take tickets from you next time for games like this. So thanks for spreading awareness on that as well. That's so nice. It's been so nice talking to you, Doug. I think your journey is inspirational. Your book, as I said personally, was very moving for me. Your Toastmasters journey, what you continue to do there is inspiring for a lot of members. So thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Thanks so much, Ritu. Really appreciate the time to get to talk with you today. It was wonderful.
Thank you.